I am really excited to have Rand here today, and particularly since COVID did not allow for an April visit that was planned. As most of you know, Rand is the co-founder of SparkToro, previously co-founder of Moz and Inbound.org. He is a frequent traveler, speaker, and a great underdog supporter. Rand has authored a book titled Lost and Founder, a painfully honest field guide to the startup world. It has been said that if you do feed him great pasta or great whiskey, he will give you the cheat code to rank #1 on Google. So with that, we welcome Rand, and he's going to share his thoughts about kind of how we are surviving in this new marketing landscape. Thanks, Rand.
Awesome, wonderful. Thank you, Paul. It is great to be here. So for those of you who don't know, I know Paul and his wife, Jamie, through their daughter, Brittany, who is a close friend of mine and my wife, Geraldine's. And I think last summer you got to come over to our backyard, I think visit our shed, which is where I'm presenting to you from today. And yeah, it's really, it's great to be here with you. I do really wish that I could have made that trip in April to Bemidji. I'm quite sad. I had planned this wonderful airport hotel, had this great rental car to drive up from Minneapolis. Was looking forward to seeing more of the great state of Minnesota, which have visited. I think I've visited Minnesota 6 times and never left greater Minneapolis, St. Paul. So I need to get out. I need to see more. All right, so I am going to share my screen here. Share screen. Oh, Paul, you need to enable me to screen share. And then that should work fine. All right, excellent. Looks like I can do that now. Yes, great. Okay, and so everyone can see these slides. Go to slideshow and present. Terrific. So yeah, Paul asked me to put together, this is going to be relatively short. I'm going to try and keep it 15-20 minutes because I think it'll be more fun since we're a nice intimate group to just do some Q&A. But it is a really tough time, and I do have some data and some recommendations for those of us who are in marketing that seem to be working well. So first off, a little context for, unfortunately, almost everyone is probably aware at this point. So there's massive unemployment going on in the United States and in a lot of other places. I think in most other countries, it's furloughs rather than actual layoffs. But here in the United States, we sort of chose to do the former, and that is having knock-on effects across the economy. I think the good news from a macroeconomic perspective is that the U.S. economy is not down all that much because, thankfully, Congress decided, bipartisan agreement to basically help a lot of Americans. Many Americans, especially those in sort of the bottom third of income earners in the country, were making as much or more from the checks that the government sent, the $600 a week checks, than they were at their jobs, which you might think maybe that's an indictment of broader capitalism, which I tend to agree with, but also it is doing a really nice job of propping things up. I think the concern going forward is that might not continue after this week. And so we do have some challenges. Personal story on this front. So I launched SparkToro with my co-founder, Casey. We did early access launch in February of this year. And SparkToro is like a software tool for marketers, right? So people subscribe, right? And they, I think our lowest price package is $150 a month, and then it goes up to $600 or so. When we sent out our first group of early access emails, it was February, and COVID-19 had not, sort of taken over everything, taken over every conversation. And so we were looking at our conversion rates, right? The rate at which people who we sent the email to signed up for the product. And the free sign up was great, but the sign up to paid was 4.5–5%, which is really high. Like we were blown away. Over the next, so the same, this is a group of about 20,000 email addresses, and we were sending out a couple thousand every week, maybe more than that, maybe like 3,000 a week for 6 weeks or so. And every week the number dropped, and every week I saw this chart in action, because in March and in April, we were sending these out, and I started getting all the bounce backs from just tons and tons of people whose bounce back said so-and-so is no longer employed here. And the conversion rate also dropped substantially from 4.5% to a little under 0.5%. So a 90% drop in conversion rate over 6 weeks with the same cohort from, no COVID to COVID everywhere in the US. Pretty brutal. I think, we all know this now, but Minnesota, right, which is a state that was very, relatively speaking, very responsible around their government action, took a bunch of measures right in the middle of March. South Dakota, a state that took none, right? They basically decided not to do anything. And yet, economically speaking, the decrease in activity was almost exactly the same, as you can see here. So whether you open up your economy or not, it doesn't really matter. The virus itself creates enough fear and uncertainty and doubt that we lose a lot of that business. And the estimation here, broadly speaking, the challenge is that everyone's affected differently. But if you're thinking about this broadly, I think these types of estimates are reasonable, which is 10 to 30% of activity over the next 9 to 24 months, and then probably a very, very long recovery period. We'll see. I really like what HubSpot has done here. If you haven't checked them out, so HubSpot is a marketing automation platform, email marketing platform, website hosting platform, whole bunch of marketing tools. But they have been aggregating all of their customer data and then anonymizing it and publishing it in these interactive charts. So you can see how many deals were created on their platform, what their email open rates were like, what their email delivery rates are like. You can see how much web traffic HubSpot sites are getting. And so we have been following this at SparkToro really, really closely. And in fact, our conversions have trended to the deals created line pretty well, right? So at the end of February, we were doing quite well. And then we had this really awful sort of dip. I mean, we launched in April publicly as things were getting a little bit better, but our data has mimicked this. And so I really appreciate HubSpot showing this, because it helps give you a sense of like, hey, how bad is it out there for everybody else too? All right, so what could we conceivably do? I think our job is to effectively try and estimate demand in 3 periods, right? And we've got some nice macroeconomic data. So like, here's what, broadly speaking, people think about opening up the economy and how long that's going to take and what the next 6-12 months will look like. So we know what our pre-crisis demand was like, right? We know what it looked like in January, February. We can really take March through June at this point and try to estimate what July through December are going to look like, right? We know what this year's sort of drop is broadly, right? So we know what we've lost, whatever our businesses are, whatever we've grown. For some of us, it might be that growth is bigger than what's lost. That's certainly true for a bunch of businesses. And then we can try and estimate longer term. And by having these estimates, maybe you could talk to your finance team or whoever, but our job as marketers is to make sure we don't cut marketing by more than this amount. Because if we do, our competitors or someone else will be taking up that space and we'll have lost out. And we don't want to cut so deep that we remove the potential for whatever the delta is in the future, right? We all know that marketing is a long-term process. Building a brand takes a long time. Positioning takes a while. Usually it's many, many touches across different platforms that cause people to subscribe and buy from us. So almost certainly your organization's in one of these buckets, right? People like Expedia or South by Southwest or Meetup, right, where you're directly harmed. People like Zoom or Whole Foods or Patreon, where you're directly benefiting from what's going on. or maybe you're indirectly affected. SparkToro is indirectly affected, right? A lot of marketers have cut budgets, so we're sort of, in the marketing toolbox, but we don't directly deal with in-person stuff or help local small businesses or those kinds of things. And if you're in the directly harmed bucket, you can sort of think about probably changing who you serve, what your product is, or your positioning of that product. If you are directly benefiting, you probably want to start investing in some new channels right now, because there's almost certainly opportunity. You have a chance to grow your brand reach, and you probably have a chance to expand your market, right? And which markets you're targeting. And if you are indirectly affected, you are likely wanting to do things like shifting your spend from lower to higher return on investment tactics, right? So maybe paid search is, barely break even ROI most of the time, and you want to cut that now because it's no longer break even, or it's barely positive, and put it into maybe long-term stuff like content marketing. Or you could shift your targeting to customers who still have budget, right? That's exactly what we've done at SparkToro, is try and position ourselves and shift toward customers who we know still have budget. Basically, people in the blue directly benefiting bucket have become our customers during COVID. So there's a strange reality going on, right? There's more ad inventory at cheaper prices than ever before. Tons of people pulled back on their budgets. Google, Facebook, Twitter, you name it, LinkedIn, right? They pulled back on their ad budgets. And there's more online attention than ever before at the same time. I'm sure Brittany knows the story as well, but there's a gentleman that both of us know who was telling me about his online flight training school, and how his Facebook ad costs per conversion were I think they were like $2.80 or maybe $3.80 in January. And in March, we had a conversation. He was like, Rand, I'm getting 40 cents a conversion, right? Because the ad inventory has gone way up, but the prices have dropped because there's no competition, right? Everybody's pulling out. Right now, they're even cheaper, although I think it's probably a good time to boycott your Facebook ads, but many, many companies are boycotting Facebook over the summer, which is, I think, an awesome move. I think a bunch of those companies are not going to come back. I think they're going to find that they can put their marketing in other creative places. Budgets are down, but they are going to rebound, right? We know that those budgets will return, maybe not to their full level, but probably to somewhere between 70 and 90% of the level they were before. And some sectors and products and services are more needed than ever before, right? So we're in this situation. I think most organizations, most businesses are going to be scared and are saving money rather than trying to grow their business right now. But there are a number who are really smart, are going to see the opportunity and try and invest in profitable growth, right? Rather than pulling back on their spend, they're just going to find creative places to put it. And we can see that there is still a bunch of opportunity. So a friend of mine, Sawhill, runs this website, Gumroad, which helps content creators and artists, musicians, all sorts of folks get their businesses online and then sell those through a subscription model. It's not dissimilar to Patreon or sort of Etsy, but not for physical goods. And you can see what their 2020 looks like as tons and tons of people go online. Same thing with Shopify. Tons of local and small businesses that benefited from foot traffic are now moving online because that's where all the consumers are going. And there's plenty of sectors seeing more growth. I don't know if you saw this, but Disney Plus had estimated that they were going to have somewhere between 50 and 90 million subscribers in 2024, so 4 years from now. And they got it in 5 months after launch. And that is mostly driven by the fact that we are all stuck at home and our kids want to watch Frozen and Frozen 2 20 times a day. I see that you all know what I'm talking about. I don't even have children and I know this. All right. This is not just true in the United States. Here's Ivano Di Biasi, and he's a marketer in Italy, looking at this rapporto sommario, and he's got, this is basically the traffic report for a cooking website. I don't know if you're familiar with Italians. All my relatives are Italian. I think next year I'm going to try and even get my Italian passport. But so the the reality is that pre-COVID, looking at a recipe website in Italy was, that's a no-no. Like, your recipes because your grandmother and her grandmother taught them to you. That's how you know how to cook. You don't look it up online. But COVID has changed things. You can't go visit grandma, and so boom, there you go. And you can see there's tons of other categories. This is from Stackline. I'll send the link. Paul, I'll send you the presentation so you can distribute it, and folks can click on the links. But Stackline does a great job of showing fast-growing categories in e-commerce and where demand is happening. But you can see tons of places that are growing. 103%. Deodorant is up 103%, and we don't even get to hang out with each other. What? But it blows my mind. It's great that we all smell good at home by ourselves, I guess. I don't know. Jason Furman, who's an economist here in the US, who I really like, a relatively speaking apolitical economist, if that interests you. And he analyzes demand in a bunch of sectors and found it truly fascinating, as did I, that cruise ships, which is where a bunch of COVID outbreak was happening, there's huge risk, you're stuck indoors with all these people, right? They look at this, they've seen increases in future bookings. And this UBS report found that 76% of the people who canceled a cruise this year have chosen to accept credit to a future cruise rather than a refund. Hey, that says to me that people are excited for a future, right? That they have money and they are ready to spend and willing to spend, and building pent-up future demand is an incredible way to take advantage of that. And that's something that we've been thinking really hard about in our business. I think probably everybody should be. So on the strategic front, what we've been trying to do is find the audiences that can still pay for what we provide, right? And we do that sort of, demographics wise, we look at it psychographics wise, and we look at behavioral stuff. Behavioral stuff would be like, what do they search for on Google, and what do they visit on the web, and who do they follow on social media, what are their sources of influence. Psychographics and demographics, I think, are probably more useful if you're B2C and you are doing consumer stuff. And then you can use these sort of surveys and interviews and usage data to find out what's changing with your audience, right? So we've been doing some of this, surveying our customers. If any of you are SparkToro either free users or paid users, you probably got a little, hey, we'll send you a $100 Amazon gift card, that kind of thing. So looking at the percentage of people who are affected and how much, who's being hit harder and softer so that we can target them, and what are people switching to. And then I always try, whenever we do surveys, I like to add the detailed color of interviews as well. Like I don't just like the macro data. I like being able to have a few individuals from that group that I've talked to, well, not in person, but over a call, right? Asking them things about like, what's changed in your life? Where are you struggling? Has our product helped you? And then looking at our usage data as well. So this is like our web analytics and looking at our own, SparkToro data, looking at similar web data, trying to figure out what stuff is performing better and worse, and which features are working well for people, and which referral sources still perform for us, those kinds of things. So as all this attention goes online even more, right? Our job is go find what our audiences are paying attention to, go find the messages that still resonate, right? The ones that are going to help people convert now, which is often very different in a recession than it is in a growth economy. And we were in a very long period of growth economy, so it's a big switch mentally. And then go market in those places with the messages that work, right? And finally, last but not least, it is a phenomenal time to experiment. One of the things that I find during recessions, during times when people are cutting budgets and thinking about it, is all of a sudden CEOs and CMOs and executive teams are open to ideas that they never would have said yes to in the past, right? I know Brittany's done this at Moz, where she's like, let's do this. And previously was like, no, we're not doing anything. And then suddenly, oh, look at that. There's budget and time and people to go do this thing that you wanted to do. And this is not just true in small organizations, it's true in big ones too. So speaking of experimentation, right, that I think these fall into 4 buckets. Product experiments, where you like launch new things to serve new needs. pricing, where you offer different prices, free packages, extended payments, positioning, where you try and highlight what your product is as a solution to a different problem that is newly relevant, or tactics, right? You change where you're doing your marketing or what you're trying to accomplish, or the balance of where you're sending traffic, those kinds of things. So I have some examples of these just to clarify it. This is Savor Seattle. They historically do tours of Pike Place Market, and which is a it's like a public market that offers lots of mostly food-centric stuff here in Seattle. It's a very popular tourist attraction. If you've been to the city, this is where almost everyone tells you to go, sometimes before even the Space Needle. And they shifted their product, right? They experimented by changing their product completely from tours to boxes, right? So they basically went to all these local businesses, and then they ship nationwide and locally. They did a special box, this Seattle Solidarity box, that featured exclusively products from Black-owned businesses here in the Seattle area, which we don't have a ton of Black-owned businesses, which is tragic. But yeah, I think Geraldine and I ordered these for like 4 or 5 friends, and they're awesome, right? Phenomenal. Whitespark did this pricing experiment. So Whitespark, if you're not familiar with Darren Shaw and their business, they're in the search industry, local search marketing, and they shifted up the product launch that they were doing to specifically position it as a Yext replacement service. So Yext, this sort of expensive way to get your local businesses data into all these providers, they changed their product to essentially be price sensitive. It's a one-time fee instead of recurring. You own your listings instead of renting them, right? It's much cheaper than the competition. Could be very effective during pandemic, during recession. Citrix, so Citrix is very similar to what Zoom does, right? If you were in business world and doing webinars and video calls in the old days, pre-Zoom, Citrix is very popular. It's still popular with a lot of enterprises, but you can see how they have changed their positioning to essentially be 2 things. 1, pandemic response, which makes sense. All the video providers are doing that. And 2, a not so subtle dig at Zoom's problems. You see it? Simplify and secure user access. Like, oh, right, because I don't want the people joining the call and bombing me and jumping in with their phone. Right. So like you can control more things about who has access to your calls and information, all that kind of stuff. Ben and Jerry did an experiment in their positioning around racial justice, and they have been not only lauded for this, but their share of market in the in affected communities that they have reached out to have skyrocketed, right? So they've seen this have not a positive business effect, although I think the folks behind Ben and Jerry's probably don't care so much about that. I think they are probably more motivated. They feel very authentic to me in terms of their messaging, but they launched this campaign on 420, which is sort of a marijuana-centric holiday for people who do that sort of thing. Despite living in Seattle where it's legal, I get headaches, so I don't. But lots of people enjoy it. So you can see, right, that there is this ice cream brand is doing this not just on their website and in their PR. They're doing it on their ice cream boxes, right, in the stores. It's pretty impressive, right? So you can see Savor Seattle doing product, Whitespark doing pricing, positioning, tactics, right? All of these changing up. And my pro tip here is to exhaust these kinds of opportunities before you just kill your marketing budget or cut your team down. I think you'll find opportunities there. Last, but not least, I'm gonna end with just a couple tactics that we've seen working really well for us and our customers. First one is podcasts. So SparkToro I do almost 3 podcasts a week. Like I'm averaging that many where I'm on a podcast, and they are amazing. They send great traffic. the people who listen to them get a really good sense of you and your product and business. And it's a really hard thing to skip. If somebody is listening to the podcast, the advertisement or the interview is the content, right? And it's being said and talked about by the host. And so this has been really, really effective for us. A ton of the people who write in to me about SparkToro are like, oh, I heard about you on the Everybody Hates Marketers podcast. I heard about you on the Mixergy podcast. I heard about you on the, what was the Elevate podcast that I just did. The second one is, I mentioned this previously, but if you can go into your analytics and look at who's sending you high value traffic, it's great to double down on those, right? So I see Buffer is sending SparkToro some really nice traffic, right? You can see the free account creation from people who visit from Buffer is quite high. And then you can use the idea of what do people who visit Buffer also visit? Where can I find more audiences like that? I'm showing SparkToro here, right? Which is a way to do that, right? I can see what the audience who frequently visits Buffer also visits. You can also use SimilarWeb. Both these products are free to try out. And I'm very impressed with SimilarWeb's data. I mean, I'm pretty impressed with SparkToro's data, but that's, some smart person must have made that. But both of these are great ways to get at that. Number 3, free value in exchange for emails is a great way to go right now. And those email addresses of people who know you, like you, trust you, that will create that pent-up future demand, like what we talked about with cruise ships, awesome way to go. So I think this is a superb tactic that I've been recommending to a ton of people, is creating things that offer free value in exchange for capturing future potential customers. And Luke Carthy had a great tweet about this, right? Setting up landing pages for e-commerce to leverage products that haven't come out yet but will. I think this is a great idea, even if you're not in e-commerce. If you know that something is launching in the future, the thing that people, Americans in particular, right, are very positive about this idea that in the near-term future, things will return to normal and get better, and they will be able to spend money and do things again. And so you can capture that by offering this future thing. Number 4, this is a highly tactical tip, but I have seen a ton of companies have a bunch of success pulling their branded paid search, like just tossing it out. I know the data, right, that says, hey, you get more clicks this way and you can sort of control your brand, but your competitors are almost certainly not bidding on your brand name right now. So it's a great time to potentially pull back that spend, which can be really expensive, and put it somewhere else. You know, I find it personally, I don't know, Brittany, if you find this, I find it infuriating, just infuriating that if I go on a podcast, right, and I talk about SparkToro, who gets the credit for that? Like Google gets the credit. So people type SparkToro into Google because they heard about it on a podcast, and then it looks to us in our analytics like someone searched Google for our brand. And so we're like, oh, Google's sending us great traffic. I should spend more on Google, instead of realizing it was because of that podcast, right? Or whatever marketing we did. Like Google is just this tax on all brand building. It's infuriating. All right. My last tip, if you need to peace out and chill. So I have had, a lot of mental and emotional struggles around this pandemic, and just how bad things are for so many people, and 130,000 Americans dying, including a couple that we know. It's just been heartbreaking, right? It's been this really hard time. And one of the best ways to balance your own psychology and to help your business, frankly, is to help other people. Helping other people, just pays huge emotional and mental dividends, and builds up this great sense of trust. So it's something that I try to do as much as I can, and I certainly recommend it to everyone else. Hopefully, next year we'll get to do this in person. Wouldn't that be so lovely? Wouldn't it be amazing? Can you imagine? Like, we could go out to a restaurant or a bar afterwards, hopefully, fingers crossed, if there's a vaccine. Please, please. I think it's Oxford University right now who has like the best shot at that. So we'll see. Okay, I'm going to stop my share. And Paul, if we want to open it up to questions or whatever you want to chat about. Oh, Paul, you're still muted. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, we can ask people, they can certainly take themselves off mute, which we can identify, and they can ask questions. And maybe just to fill in the gap here, I'll start with this group, Rand, as you know, I think spends a lot of time supporting and working with latent entrepreneurs, trying to mitigate risk for them. And now we're at a time when it seems like there's more risk than ever. And I'm wondering if there's anything we can do to help with that process or support those people during this time when there could also be these great opportunities available for them.
Yeah. I mean, I think that I think there's two sides to this challenge, right? An equation for a lot of entrepreneurs, a lot of small business owners, medium-sized business owners, folks who are doing online business. The two sides are, one, I have to make changes in my business in order to survive and thrive, right? And that's sort of structural and tactical and strategic. And so a lot of the stuff we covered in the presentation is designed exactly for that. But I think there's this other side, which is I'm scared and I feel uncomfortable and I feel an uncertainty and I feel anxiety and I don't know what I get to look forward to. I think that that side of things is really, really tough. And I think it's an area where entrepreneurs could use your help as well. And I am not a professional in that field, but I do have a bunch of experience there. And the best thing I can say is if you can demonstrate your own vulnerability to those people, right, to the people that you're helping, that is a very, very fast way to build a relationship and to help them through sort of those challenges. And oftentimes, you have to open up before they do. And I want to be clear. I think this is a particularly pernicious challenge for men, right? Because I think we're sort of socialized and culturally conditioned not to open up about this type of stuff and not to have vulnerability, right? It's perceived as weakness when in fact it's the opposite. And so that's a hard step to take. And a lot of entrepreneurs and business owners are men, not as many as are women in the United States. There's more women business owners than there are men, but that is, I think, a key to how we can help each other through this period. So I would encourage folks to do it. I know it's hard. It's hard.
Great. I know Samantha has raised her hand here. Sam, you want to go ahead?
Yeah, great presentation, Rand. Thank you so much. I wanted to ask you, the first tactic you had mentioned was, getting on podcasts.
Oh,
this
yeah.
is something that we've been trying to do. Do you have advice on how to pitch, where to go, how to get on podcasts? Because that's been a struggle for us.
Okay. It is, I know it's weird, but this has worked for me almost every time. I don't think it has failed me once. And that is, rather than pitching the podcast host directly, I look on LinkedIn to who they're connected to that I know, right? First or second degree. And then I get an introduction with hey, do you think I'd be a good guest for this person's podcast? And one of two responses comes back. I don't know if you'd be a good guest for that podcast, because I haven't listened to it, or I think you'd be a great guest for that podcast. And if they say they think they'd be a great guest, would you mind telling that person and making an email introduction for me? Boom. You immediately get on the podcast. One of the things that's amazing about podcasts, Samantha, is that the hosts, in my experience, the hosts are almost always desperate for guests, especially sort of small to medium podcasts, right? If a podcast has hundreds to thousands or even tens of thousands of weekly listeners or of downloads per episode, it tends to be the case that the host is desperate for new guests and good guests. And so if someone in their network introduces someone and says they're going to be great, that they just take you up on it, right? They send you they usually have like a little Calendly invite that they'll send over, right? And you just schedule it. The only other advice I'd have is make sure to look for podcasts that are relevant, right? So like reach the audience you want to reach. SparkToro has a nice podcast search engine and it's free. Like you can run a bunch of free searches through there. The other one that I really like is I think they just changed their name to, is it Lemon Pie? Yeah, the folks who run that. Oh shoot. Okay, I'm gonna try and find. Lemon Pie is another company. I'm gonna try and find there's a podcast search engine that's really great. Brittany, do you know which one I'm talking about maybe?
I can't think of one off the top of my head.
Okay, I'll find it in my email. Paul, I'll send it to you and you can send it to the group. And Samantha, next time I will include that in the presentation.
Thank you. That is so awesome. Great tips. We haven't tried that approach yet. So thank
the
you.
introduction is gold.
Awesome.
Rand, you want to put in a little quick plug for SparkToro and maybe an explanation of what you're working on?
Oh, sure. Yeah, no problem. So SparkToro, yeah, just to be clear, what we do is essentially build a giant searchable database of a bunch of social and web profiles so that you could, for example, say, oh, I have a new product for electrical engineers and we are launching in Canada. And so I want to know which podcasts and websites and social accounts and publications and papers are read and consumed and listened to by electrical engineers in Canada. So you just type in electrical engineer, add location Canada, and then you get a list of websites and social accounts and podcasts and YouTube channels that those people pay attention to with the percentage, right? So like 12% of the electrical engineers in our database subscribe to, listen to, engage with this podcast. So it's designed to help marketers find the sources of influence for any given audience, and also to help with something I call the Wall Street Journal problem. I don't know if any of you have ever had the Wall Street Journal problem, but like you walk into a meeting room with whatever it is, a VP of marketing, a CMO, what have you, and they go, I want you to get us in the Wall Street Journal. I don't know why they sound like a rough Wall Street trader from the 80s, but regardless, and then you say to them, but you just told us you want to reach electrical engineers in Canada. That's our target market, right? Why would we be in the Wall Street Journal? Me and my golf buddies all read the Wall Street Journal. That's where we need to be. It's just, it's infuriating, right? And it's hard to bring data to that conversation to convince those executives or teams or marketers, even sometimes an agency, right, that where your budget and your efforts should go to in order to reach the target audience that you want to reach. And so SparkToro is trying to solve that in a way that is accessible to everyone and not just, a lot of folks that we talk to use like GSQI or GQI MRI survey data, those kinds of things. And it's just ludicrously expensive, hundreds of thousands of dollars to do this. And so big brands get that data, but the rest of us are left out. We want to change that.
And Rand, I know we have some great marketing agency people on the call. Work very hard for our community, and wondering if you have any kind of current advice for those agencies during particularly COVID time, whether it's SEO or marketing. Yeah,
so I think a couple of things are true on the agency side right now, and a little over half of SparkToro's customers are agencies, no surprise, but so I keep in close touch with a lot of agency owners, and a few things that I have found are one, that there are a ton of brands who are looking for new agencies or looking to contract because they cut their marketing teams really deeply in February, March, April. And now as, as recovery is coming and as they want to make investments going toward Q3, Q4, they are trying to do that in a way that doesn't bring full-time employees on board. And also, one of the big advantages I think agencies have right now is that nobody can get together in person. And so the value of like, oh, I want someone in my office it's gone, right? And so agencies can kind of win from that because the pitch is less, there's less friction, right? You are going to be doing similar work. What I have seen have success is folks who are highlighting their work in particular spheres. I think those examples that are more niche are generally speaking more successful. And I have seen a bunch of folks do a really smart thing, not a bunch of folks. I've seen 2 agency owners that I know talk about how they basically looked at data from a couple of sources. One is SimilarWeb. I talked about them briefly in the presentation. SimilarWeb is like a clickstream data provider. So they aggregate a bunch of information about how many people visit which websites and where does their traffic come from. And these agency owners looked at their sectors to see websites that were rising, where demand was rising, and then they pushed their marketing and networking in those directions, right? So essentially trying to figure out, where are we seeing resurgent demand? Where are we seeing an increase? Let's go put our own either networking or the webinars we're putting out or the blog posts that we're writing or who we're following on Twitter and replying to, right? Who we're following on LinkedIn and commenting on. Let's do all of that stuff toward areas and businesses that we know have marketing dollars to invest. And anytime you see a spike in that, you know that there's dollars to put to work there.
Great, thank you.
What platform would you recommend for doing the webinars?
Yeah, I have done them on a ton of platforms. I don't think Zoom is bad. I think it can be quite effective. The bandwidth and latency and video quality are pretty solid. I have also seen the YouTube live webinars go pretty well, and you can attract, you can get a lot of broad audience listeners. It's harder to do the participation element, but if you're doing mostly broadcast, that works well, and then it gets published on YouTube, which can attract more visitors in the future, and YouTube gets a ton of search volume, so having the post up there is nice. That being said, I think there's advantages to hosting the video on your own platform and driving folks there and then taking excerpts of it and posting them to YouTube to sort of, here's a teaser, like here's a little snack. If you want the full meal, you got to come over to our website and put in your email address and that kind of thing. There was another platform that I thought that I was pretty impressed by, that I did a webinar on. Who was that with? It might have been this. Was it the Marketing Institute of Ireland? Oh, that one was Zoom. We did one. Oh, I did one with Proficient that was pretty solid. That was, okay, I'm gonna have to look it up and again I'll send to Paul and have him send to you, Sarah.
Thank you.
Or we can get directly email connected. If you want to email me, rand@sparktoro.com, you can just email me and then I'll reply to you.
Thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
On that question about webinars, with YouTube Live, do they have like a registration process for YouTube webinars?
I believe you can just join direct, even anonymously. So, okay. It's kind of a decision between, do I want to capture an email address, or is my goal just as many people as possible watching? And I think you balance those two out, right?
And on that topic, since webinar is really fresh for us, we just hosted one yesterday, had over 200 signups, 35 showed up. Is that industry standard? Have you found ways of getting more people to actually show up?
It
Any tips
is,
there?
it's really funny. So at the start of the pandemic, like late February, early March, the rate of attendance to registration was higher than it's ever been. So historically, I think the historic average was between 50 and 60%, right? I did webinars for like the last 10, 20 years, and that was, 50 to 60% was pretty standard. You have 1,000 registrants, 500 to 600 people show up. It spiked to 700, 800, right? 70, 80% at the start of this, and then it fell off a cliff. So I think that I think what's going on, and I can understand it, right, is that we all, there are more people online than ever before, and many of them are thinking like, oh yes, I would like to join this, and this sounds interesting, and I should learn that, and I should do that. And then we get overwhelmed, right? And we get, I think, both overwhelmed and also, folks have been calling it Zoom fatigue, but I think it's just online interaction fatigue, which I also totally have empathy for. By the end of my days, I have a lot of video call fatigue, right? And when friends are like, oh, let's do a cocktail happy hour over Zoom, I kind of have to like, oh no, can we not do that? How about maybe let's do it on a weekend? I don't know. So I think that is a real phenomenon, and I have seen those registration rates fall to, attendance rates from registration fall to below 20% for a bunch of the webinars I've done, right? So I did one for SimilarWeb last month, and they, their folks were telling me like, oh my gosh, we filled up our registrations. We can't take any more. We're at our max. I think their max was 1,000. And then when 220 folks showed up, they sent me an email like, we're so sorry, we don't know what happened. Like usually our attendance rates are so much higher. And I told them, don't worry, it's nothing you did. You didn't do anything wrong. It's fine. People are just, I think there's a lot more pseudo committal folks who are signing up rather than high committed folks.
And again, anyone take yourself off mute and we can see that. And make
I have a weird question.
Go ahead.
Okay. So, Rand, something I've been encountering since I've been home is just talking to all of these small business owners who might have a website, but they don't allow online orders. Very few local businesses here have done things like claim their local business listing, and I get the impression that they are so overwhelmed, and especially in the current state of affairs, they don't even know where to start. And so I have been struggling, and I'm curious to get your thoughts on like, how can some of these very small sort of boutique shops and maybe restaurants, what do they do just to get a little bit of help with all of this?
Yeah. So I think broadly speaking, Brittany, it's probably going to be different for every different business, and different for even different restaurants and different bars and different, whatever, clothing shop or a hotel or what have you. But the way that I try and help folks who are in those situations is like I was helping a woman who runs a pierogi shop in Pike Place Market. Do you know pierogi? Yeah. So she called me up, right? And her name is Olga. She has a very adorable, thick Russian accent. And she was like, how do I get my pierogis to people? I'm like, okay, all right, we're gonna slow it down. We're just gonna try and do one thing, right? Like let's do one thing and focus on one thing. And so that was, I think her start was basically taking her frozen pierogis and shipping them locally, right? And so she basically just concentrated on like finding that one thing and enabling that ordering system. There are a bunch of there are so many platforms that are trying to help people right now. I don't know that I have one that I highly recommend. Shopify's been doing some pretty cool stuff around this. So has Stripe's been doing some cool stuff here, and they have a bunch of integrations that play really nicely with websites. Like even Google Shopping, right? They just made their commission stuff free. What was that, yesterday or day before yesterday? So, you know, there's a whole slew of options. I think the right way to play it for almost all of these businesses is to set up one thing that they offer through one platform and then connect that to their Google business, online Google business account, because most of the search volume for the business is going to be for the business itself.
Yeah.
Like what I don't see, for example, is I don't see people searching for ship me frozen pierogies Seattle.
Right.
But they still get a ton of searches for pierogi. Like
Yep.
people are curious, can I go pick things up there? Do they do takeout? Are they open? Do they have outdoor seating that we can sit outside with it? You know, like what's the situation? And so I think it's all that branded search where you want to play a lot of that stuff. But I mean, you can look at the keyword demand too, depending on the business. If they get enough of it, you can do Google Trends and see what else is going on there. But
Yeah. Cool. Thank you.
Brittany, I think there's not much you can do for a lot of them. A lot of us here have seen the struggles. They're just not tech savvy. They wouldn't even know how to even look for that page to find it. So it's mostly like if there's like this angel that can like run around and be this free consultant and just help everyone, that's the only way it really will get done. So hopefully, just through hearing it more and more, maybe, and because we're forced to be online, where people just become a little more tech savvy.
Yeah.
Rand, I recently reread Lost and Founder, and I always thought that I was kind of a multitasker, but I think I'm going to remove that identifier as I reread that section. Wonder if you just want to comment on that a little bit, because I think it's very interesting.
Yeah. So there's all this, Paul, there's all this great research around what we believe ourselves capable of, and multitasking and focus and these kinds of things. And I actually found it really, what do I want to say, relieving and fascinating that essentially no one is good at multitasking. And so you don't have to feel bad about not being great at it. And that your ability to switch between tasks and then do one well and another well tends to come from this like reserve of energy that you've got. And it is very easy to spend all of that, especially right now, and then not have any more. And so the research has generally found that even people who say they're really good at multitasking get far less done in a world where they're doing multiple things at once, and their cognitive capacity is dramatically diminished by a long stretch of multitasking, meaning that, let's say you are on this webinar and you're also trying to answer your emails at the same time. And so you're like, well, I want to listen to this Rand guy, but I'm trying to answer some emails. There will be more mistakes in your email. You won't answer them as fast. Your email replies won't be as good. You won't process or remember the information that you're listening to from me. Like all those things tend to be more and more true. That's not to say you get zero value, just that it feels less. And your future energy, like, your afternoon workload will feel more difficult to you if you have done multitasking in the morning, and so there's this really interesting research around, for example, like the shower thinking issue. You know how people have this thing where they go, oh, I have all my best ideas in the shower. And it's because you have nothing to do, right? Like you are free from all the other things, right? There's no one around, you are alone, you can't do anything. It's just you and shampoo and water. Like it's, and your brain is often doing the. So this is one of my favorite things about human biology is that, let's say you have a thorny problem in your life or work or with your business or whatever, and you say, oh, I need to solve that right now. Like I need to work on it. Your brain does this great, amazing thing where it sort of puts it in the background, almost like a computer processing a job, like in the background, and then it updates you when it's finished. Like, oh, we've finished updating your antivirus software, whatever it is, right? And your brain will do that, and very often that's like released at a later time. And so if you give yourself the freedom to not work for a while, your brain will do all this and will build up these energy reserves, and then you get this burst of productivity and great ideas. I always find this with with vacations, which you can't do anymore. I'm really infuriated. You can, like, you could technically take a vacation somehow, somewhere, but have you had this experience where you get back from like a 2-week trip, right, or a 10-day trip or something, and your email inbox is just flooded? It is overwhelmed. There's like a million things in there, and you say to yourself, I'll never finish it. Like by the end of this week, I won't have anything done. And then it's Tuesday afternoon, and you look at your inbox and you go, God, I got through all of it. How did I do that? That was 2 weeks of work I just did in 2 days. That is because you took 2 weeks off. And your brain is like, boom, I can just fly through tasks. Nothing takes me time anymore. Like I am on because I had all this time off and I was ready for it. This is, I feel like this is the thing that we are most terrible at doing in the United States. Like we just haven't figured out that brains work this way and people work this way. And so we think that working all the time is good, when in fact, if you take time off, you are way more productive. So yeah. Sorry, long answer to a short question, Paul.
I like it. I'm going to take more showers myself. So.
Yeah, and more deodorant. It's up 103% right now. So, you can smell great for Jamie.
I know we could talk to Rand all day. We want to be sensitive to the time, and we certainly hope that we can get him back and certainly get him in Bemidji. Any last final comments, questions before we wrap up? And again,
Thank
Rand,
you for all your information.
Oh, my pleasure. Paul, Brittany, thank you, everyone. I really, really appreciate you having me, and I wish you folks well. If you need anything, if I can be helpful at all, I'm Rand at Spark Toro, and Paul will you'll send around the presentation.
Yes, I will.
This is awesome.
Take care.
Thank you so much, Rand.
Bye.
Yeah.